Look who we have here. Maiden voyage for Sigmund Bloom on the Minded Mansion program. Welcome, Sigmund.
Oh, it's great to be here. It's a good place to be. I like what you've done with the place, your mind.
Yes, this is going to be a good show. I'm very excited about it. Theo has been, badgering me for more than a year. And then, we had a couple scheduled and then we rescheduled. And, I'm a dog with a bone, man. I'm not going to let go. Right? Yeah. I'm going to be like, hey, remember, Sig, we had this thing? And I'm like, well, let's throw some more dates out there. Bingo, we got it. Monday, November 11th. Let's do this. So you are, I think, you're most known for the On the Couch podcast. How did you start your podcast? When did it start? Because we started this about 10 years ago. When did you start the On the Couch and really kind of get going with this whole media ecosystem that you have there at guys?
Well, I mean, first I have to accept, I started on the Audible and with Cecil, and it really was simple. As like we talked on the phone after I got hired at Football Guys. We talked on the phone for about 3 hours about the draft, and he said, "Do you want to do this again? But we'll record it." And he actually put the telephone up to the tape recorder. I mean, it was that primitive. This would have been 2005, 2006. But then as the whole thing starts to evolve, and I'm going to give a shout out to Mark Folletti, who I did a bunch of stuff with for a couple of years there. We had, before an economic collapse of 2008, we thought we maybe had the tiger by the tail. And he really encouraged me to do something that I hosted myself. And it was very simple because we actually have a kind community. Or if you're talking about, I know this might sound strange to people that just came into the fantasy football media sphere in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, but back then everybody knew each other and everybody respected each other and was kind. The social media was still pretty new. The whole idea that was before DFS, like the whole idea of the gold rush that was going to happen, it becoming an industry, was still just like a hobby that we liked doing so much. We just tried to find a way to make it sustainable. And the thing that I really liked about On the Couch was, and I'm not trying to, I mean, in my head, I have delusions of grandeur. So I always try to never say anything that sounds remotely like that. But I think it was the first show where you had people on from other websites or other outlets. I mean, not just beat writers, but people that were your competitors. Because in the early internet, it was like, you didn't even mention that competitors existed. Ooh,
Oh, really?
It was just like, we're the only thing that exists is our thing. Like, we don't even want to mention somebody else. And it really kind of broke a taboo to have people on and say, this person's really good. This site that we're competing for your dollar with is actually really good. I actually consume this content from this site. Because if we grow the pie, everybody gets to eat, everybody gets a seat at the table. And sure enough, that's happened. And I've just gotten to know a lot of people. And it's been a real joy because I'm a compulsive talker, and to have something to do, like, it validates me. Like that you're listening to me right now validates me. That everybody out there is listening to me now validates me. I get to be validated as my job. How awesome is that?
I think it feels great. Yeah. I mean, wow, you were recording a show by putting a phone up to a recording device.
Right.
And then posting it.
Mm-hmm. And I think we recorded that first show like 3 or 4 times just because it kept being so bad, but we pushed through, and very quickly all the technology rose up around it to make this mass-produced podcast. Cease and I aren't even sure that the word podcast was in the lexicon yet.
No, not back then. 2005? No way. When we launched in 2014, we used Blog Talk Radio, and that was also a telephone.
Right.
That was not a microphone.
You called
that
in.
was you call. I had a wireless phone, and I basically talked into a phone call with a recording device on the other end. That was it. I just to myself. It was weird.
Yeah.
It felt a little more. It felt a little lonelier to record that way into a phone with no one on the other end of the line than it does to just record a solo pod with a microphone. For some reason, it almost had it wasn't quite the comfort level that you have with something about a microphone, even if you're by yourself in a studio, it feels more natural.
Yeah, right. Like after the apocalypse, we're just going to be still sitting in front of our microphones, like because it's not tangents. I will eventually talk about football while I'm here, but it's up to you. You have to keep me in line. But I always tell people if they're adrift in their life, like, what did you pretend that you were when you were a kid? That's something that was in you that kind of understood at least where that golden thread is for you in this universe. And I used to walk around with my tape recorder when I was 5, 6 years old and like interview my family, and like narrate this show for this audience of my life. And now we get to actually do it.
Yeah. You were practicing being a podcast host way back then. Yeah. Way back then. And I was practicing playing fantasy football before there was a such thing as fantasy football in the, I guess, early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Right, early 90s, it was Thurman Thomas, it was Jim Kelly, it was Aikman Smith, all those guys, Andre Rison. And we had the football cards, and we would lay the football cards out basically in just a big square of football cards, like a sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would have a draft, and you would just go and pick football cards, and you'd build a team with football cards, and the four of us would have football, and then we'd have a four-person tournament. And I would be like Dungeons and Dragons. So it was a combination of football cards and Dungeons and Dragons where you have to have a dungeon master who would narrate the game. And here's how this game played out because you have these cornerbacks and these receivers where there was an interception. And because we knew the stats, you could look at the stats on the back. Okay, this guy has high interceptions. Okay, there's an interception here, a return for a touchdown. He's high stepping down the sidelines. Team X just won, Team Y lost. The funny thing, though, Sig, and I mean, my friends still remind me about this, is that I was the dungeon master, so I was practicing broadcasting back then. Weird thing was my teams always won those tournaments. It was weird. It was very lucky. I had a real lucky streak of wins there. With a totally objective game like that, it's shocking.
Right. The simulation. Well, I mean, it's good. It's funny too because when we moved here, and everything grows in New Orleans like crazy, and my wife got into the love of my life, Kate, got into milkweed and monarch butterflies, and the problem was that she planted some milkweed, and the caterpillars came, and the hungry little caterpillar is actually nonfiction. I mean, they really do eat just incredible, and they grow like 50 times in size in like a week. It's not quite a thing to behold. But then all the
that color green, that translucent green that they are.
Yeah.
That's such a wonderful color.
They're like
green.
aliens. They're
it's so
aliens.
Cool.
I mean, watching metamorphosis is quite a thing. So, but the thing was that all the milkweed would get eaten, and then there'd be hungry little caterpillars with no milkweed, and we'd go buy 3 more milkweed plants and plant them. But then the next time, more monarchs would come, and they would still eat it all, and we'd have to plant more milkweed. And finally, my wife was just getting kind of emotionally exhausted at like feeling this. Like I'm encouraging these caterpillars to come into existence, and then I can't feed them. And every time this happens, and I just said, it's not easy being God, is it? But you, I think, did the right thing with being God when you were the God of your simulation Dungeons & Dragons. And it is Dungeons & Dragons, except it's real people.
That's what it was.
Do real things, yeah. But that's awesome.
Yeah, that was the original fantasy football, and my buddy made a T-shirt with the football cards because we still meet up every year, the four of us.
Awesome. That's it. That's what it's about.
Yeah. So we haven't actually played the next move. That's what I should do because it's always a challenge. What are you going to bring to the table, right? Are you going to plan the trip? Are you going to bring something, right? I think my big contribution was I actually brought a Chromecast because it was always we'd be in these Airbnbs and it would always be a nightmare to we can never put what we want on the TV, trying to figure it out. It would waste half the vacation trying to figure out the TV. So I was like, I'm bringing a Chromecast. That was my big thing. And sometimes just little things work out. But now I could bring a box of football cards, and we could maybe do a box break. Open the football cards, then we could do a fantasy Dungeons and Dragons tournament from the football cards. Just like that's the whole thing. Why do you think all this memorabilia is so expensive? Why do you think people are buying Coca-Cola refrigerators?
Right.
From the 50s. It's nostalgia. It reminds them of when they were a kid. Yeah. So I have no problem leaning into nostalgia. Let's do it. Like, to me, it doesn't feel lame. To me, it feels beautiful.
Yeah, it's love, because there's love at the center of it, because it's a feeling of when your soul was bright, something in the world made your soul light up, and it still does. So absolutely, that's what this is really about. I mean, I was so happy when you said the four of you still get together every year, because that's what this is always about. It sounds trite because it goes with Lost, which I could start ranting. It's one of the few things, it's like very high on the list of things that will make you rant. But when they said it's about the friends you make along the way, I mean, actually, it kind of is.
It really is. Whew. So we found ourselves, covering sports now, which is great. It's a fun thing to do. I'm very happy that this is how things worked out. I'm very happy that there is this thing called, simulated football, that where we can take a game and then we can play a game that's a layer on top of another game. And then it can be, and if we're already in a simulation, then it's a simulation of a simulation.
Simulacrum, I think, is actually the term.
It's something. It's not something that is particularly serious, right? Right. This is one of the most frivolous activities that you could do, and yet sometimes the most frivolous activities give people the most joy. It gives people the most escape from what would be some difficulty. You can find it just scrolling through your free agent pool, and then looking up stats, and then you can find yourself lost in that for an hour, and that was a great part of your day. And so that's what we're doing, man. That's what we're delivering. It's great. It took me a little while. It took me a little while. It took me a few years to think, okay, you don't have to have an existential crisis about this. You are delivering joy to people. There's plenty of serious content out there. There's plenty of serious activities out there. There's plenty of life and death out there. You could do something that's not anything close to that, and it's going to be and you're doing just fine.
Yeah. I mean, now granted, I like a good existential crisis. I mean, I have existential crisis on the reg, but absolutely, I can talk about at the length about anything really. But the idea of the moral quandary at first of, like you said, frivolous is a perfect way to put it. I mean, this is, as its stated purpose, something frivolous. And I wanted to be the play-by-play announcer for the Pirates, and I wanted to start the revolution. And I went to law school, and I learned that the game was rigged, and it kind of broke my spirit. It should have actually made me that much more intent to fight. But I was going to be a social justice warrior. I was going to fight for the underdog. I had all these heroes, and it broke my spirit. And then when this all happened, and there's stuff that happened in between, I thought, but shouldn't I be doing something that matters, And a lot of people have been really kind, because they hear me say this on the show every now and then, and people will tell me, like, no, you're helping people's mental health. And the people who, like you said, the EMTs or the emergency room doctors or the people that are doing like dangerous jobs on our behalf, like that, like this gives me some relief. So that you're still helping that. So absolutely, it's good to come out the other end and feel like, no, even though it's very self-indulgent, it's still something good.
Yeah, because we are going to talk Giants Panthers.
Oh yeah,
like that's a thing we're going to do. We're gonna have to talk some Giants Panthers, and was there a particular performance from this past weekend that really kind of turned you on?
The first name that popped in my head is Kyler Murray. And I say that because it can be representative of a team entering a whole new phase in their arc. And offensively, it felt like watching, because we watched Drew Petzing last year made some chicken salad out of some stuff for Arizona without Murray, without a full speed Murray. And all talk was, and Kyler seemed real relaxed this offseason. They let him talk. And he was really just being himself. It didn't seem like he was trying to prepare his remarks. And this idea that maybe he was going to, and was Cliff really good for him in the end? Now, there's a whole other chapter with Cliff going on right now, too. Separate topic. But you thought, well, maybe Kyler can take all these natural talent he has, and then if he buys into the offensive scheme and it's making the game easier for him, and they're adding Marvin Harrison Jr., this could be fun. But it wasn't happening. It was choppy in the first half of the season. He had a couple of long touchdown runs, but otherwise it was pretty choppy. But this game felt like everything really came together. And the confidence level for this team is sky high right now. And you wonder whose fantasy destiny is it going to change? Because still, this isn't considered one of the elite multiplier level fantasy offenses, but it might be becoming one.
I mean, we're talking about going, 22 of 24 against the Jets defense? I mean, this is up there with one of the best performances by any quarterback in the NFL this year.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the NFC now. Look at the NFC West.
They're a Super Bowl contender, man.
They're currently leading the NFC West. They're 6-4. San Francisco's 5-4. Rams are 4-4. Seattle's 4-5. And they've got a positive point differential. So they're right there with San Francisco. Anything can happen between these two.
And they held Detroit to 20 points back in week 3, but the offense was very good, so they scored 13. So don't tell me, in a one game, the team we just watched in a one game scenario can play with anybody in the NFC.
Yeah. Do you hear? What is it? Is there a? I think there's a. I hear something. Something's going on. Sig.
Lights just went off.
Mm.
Smoke.
Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program. One of the great podcasters in the history of fantasy football. One of the original OGs here with me today. It is my true great pleasure to welcome to the podcast right now, right here, it is Sigmund Bloom. Talk to me.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I'm jealous that you gave yourself permission to do that, because I mean, I wanted to be like the play-by-play announcer for the Pirates, but I loved being Michael Buffer too. That was pretty awesome when you got to pretend you were Michael Buffer. So
once a week I get to do it, dude.
Yeah, and so I'm sedate in my old age now, so I'm afraid I'd hurt myself if I tried to do that now. But maybe it's something we should all try to do at least once a week.
Well, I don't need to work out on Mind of Mansion days, because that gets my heart rate up.
Yeah.
That's a it's a lung workout. It's a cardiovascular workout. It's a voice box workout. I've checked off the workout for the day after that.
Yeah, and it's important to get exercise every day.
Feels great, man. Feels great. And I'm sure it feels great to be announced that way. I should one day, you know what I should do? Oh my God, this sounds great. Because you just said, hey, sometimes you got to do something for yourself. Sometimes you got to make sure you take care of yourself. What I could do is I could do an intro for myself and pre-record it. And then in some solo podcast, I could bring myself in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is a level of meta I hadn't even considered.
Oh yeah, well, and
dude, you're taking my mind to different places.
Let's do it. Well, no, and it's within reach, Matt. It's within reach that we could interview ourselves. Really, we're just a few years away. But then I think of that South Park episode when Cartman ran into another Cartman. And it was disastrous. I mean, it was like the worst possible thing that could have happened to Cartman. And maybe running into ourselves. I'm turning this into On the Couch, and you'll have to we'll take this over to the couch later on this year. But like, if we had to interview ourselves, it might just destroy us. I mean,
was that the one where the handymen became billionaires?
I think it's all, my brain is Swiss cheese now. But I know that when Cartman had to deal with Cartman, I think that it was maybe the episode when he time travels to the past for some American Revolution thing, but he has to deal with himself in the present. Yes. I don't know. That's the one, this is the perfect American moment to remind everybody that particular episode, I could be mixing them up. I think it was founding a country on the idea of saying one thing, but doing a different thing.
I mean, if you're writing television shows or movies, the concept of the multiverse, when physicists brought those tablets down from the mountain, what a gift. If you're writing any movie, any TV show, you can always pull that multiverse lever, and you can make things happen in the script, in the plot, which make no fucking sense. But you just want to make it happen, right? You want Cartman to interact with Tom Cruise or whatever it is. You can make it happen now. Multiverse, do it.
Yeah, I mean, all possibilities are on the table now. But, all possibilities are on the table sounded great in theory. But now that we're in all possibilities on the table and we're seeing, no, really, all, including the ones you didn't want to think about, those are on the table too. It's not a little, always what they say, watch what you wish for, right?
That's right. Do you notice we got the lava lamp?
Who's in the background?
Did you see the lava lamp?
That was about 11 or 12 years old, I think, is when I asked for a lava lamp for Christmas. Who's in the photo behind you beside the lava lamp?
Oh, that's John Coffey Hayes. He's the original Texas Ranger.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to take it upon yourself to sort of found a new organization to try to defend people against like the most adept warriors.
Yes.
Like since the samurai.
Right. No, it's funny because
you're pretty cool.
I lived in Texas for 20 years, but I didn't grow up in Texas. And I think in 7th grade in Texas, you take Texas history. And I read Lone Star, which is one of the definitive histories of Texas. And when you start to learn about the Texas Rangers and the original Texans, so many things about modern Texans make sense.
Yeah, I mean it's the bad, and then and then Samuel Colts, and then these guys that they cracked the code.
Yeah,
they cracked the code, which was certainly it wasn't a great time in our history for the United States. It was a dark period, but if you just look at what the Texas Rangers fighting the Comanches and the back and forth that went back and forth, like they were winning. Like that to me is a great success story of how the hell did they win for so many decades against so many more people, against huge numbers, against technology, against firepower. How the hell do you do that? And they did stuff like the warriors, before they would ride, they would start from a distance that was incomprehensible to anybody. And they would drink water until they puked, so they wouldn't have to bring any water with them. They wouldn't have to stop for any water for an extended period of time. And so, like, once in a while, my daughter will have like 2 soccer practices in a row or 2 games in a row or whatever, and she'll be complaining, right? And then I'll say some reference, and no one will know what the fuck I'm talking about. Yeah. And I'll be like, you got to go full Comanche on this. Yeah. And people might think, well, she's going to commit a foul or something. I'm like, no. She's going to drink water until she feels like she has to throw up.
Right.
That's what you got to do, because so you don't feel dehydrated and have to come out. Right.
Comanche. I mean, let's just do a whole show on the Comanche and the Apache. I mean, that's where it's at, really.
I mean, when they and with Little Bighorn, they finally decided, they were going to put their a lot of internal struggle between the tribes, right? Always, and they finally said, "Listen, we're going to lock arms, and they're not going to see this coming, because they think that we're these disparate groups, and if we unify, we're going to wipe them out." And they did. So it's certainly super fascinating, and it's cool to talk to people from other countries. Right? Talk to a guy from Germany, and he's like, "Dude, 1800s America." It's like they teach it in schools, and it's fat. I read all these books about it. Like, they know more about it than I do. Like, it's that interesting. And so
listen.
You just talk to you as a kid, and you're like, yeah, this is just what happened. And, we played Cowboys and Indians or whatever. That's what they used to call it. But actually, super fascinating moment in time in world history.
It's like the action movie of all action movies. Which is one of our best exports. But no, just to piggyback on what you're saying, Arthur Conan Doyle And Sherlock Holmes is so underrated. There's a reason that Sherlock Holmes is like the most recognized character in the history of all fictional characters. But the first Sherlock Holmes story, there's a massive part of it that is just about Utah and the Mormons. The first, when the Mormons got to Utah, and that's actually the premise that sets up the murder in London, and he sets the whole scene. So obviously he was fascinated by like just that one little pane in the mosaic. And I was lucky enough to grow up for about 4 years in New Mexico, right next to the Como Pueblo, which I think is the longest. I don't know if it's that Pueblo or the Taos Pueblo. It's like the longest continuously inhabited Pueblo. And the chief was just like someone you rub elbows with. And this was like a small community, uranium mining town, Grants. I think it's a ghost town now in western New Mexico. And I was lucky because I was in a place where other cultures were also valued and put, venerated as something that has wisdom for people here on Earth. We said this Pledge of Allegiance in Spanish in my elementary school. This was like 1981 or 82. But Native Americans, the 1800s, manifest destiny. This is where, I don't want to get your show blacklisted because we're in a different era now.
Right.
But
no,
manifest destiny.
Please, no.
But
all means.
I'll just say this, Matt. We think about how we think of manifest destiny,
right?
And then think about it if you saw it from the perspective of the Europeans and people who lived through World War II, or like their nation has like the collective memory of World War II. And think about the similarities and how maybe it might look differently from a different cultural perspective.
Totally. And you're not alone, by the way. In Maine, I grew up in northern Maine, and there were a bunch of French speakers and loggers, near where I grew up. In school, we sang both national anthems.
Yeah, of course.
We sang "O Canada."
Yeah.
It was the Olympics were happening, and I started singing "O Canada," and my wife and daughter like spun around and like, how do you know?
Who are you? Sleeper cell.
I'm like, what do you mean? It's "O Canada." "O Canada,
yeah.
my home and native land." And they're like, what? And I'm like, we sang this. And they're like, you did, just excuse, in the United States? I'm like, yeah, it didn't seem weird.
Yeah, well, it's a different time. Before 9/11, the borders were very permeable, and like Juarez and El Paso was one community. Laredo and Nuevo Laredo was one community. The film, another Lone Star, Lone Star's not come up twice. The film Lone Star, John Sayles, incredible film. Young Matthew McConaughey, incredible cast. Francis McDormand, Chris Christopherson, rest in peace. A terrific Texas border story, like the definitive Texas border movie. And when you grow up, my wife's from El Paso, and she's Mexican American, and you grow up in the border, you understand like having multiple consciousnesses, understanding different things from different perspectives. Just that experience. I've been up to northern Maine too. Gorgeous, amazing country. And the Acadians ended up down here in Louisiana, the Cajuns. Lots of fun stuff there too.
Oh yeah,
that history. That's why there's a Catholic part of the South.
That's right.
Part of it. Anyway, so we're supposed to be talking about football. Well, I guess we're in your mind, so it's really whatever you want to talk about.
We should talk about the history of the Chicago Bears and where we stand right now with the Chicago Bears. I am worried about Ryan Poles, because I think that if you get a bunch of draft picks right and a bunch of free agent picks right, but if you get the rebuilding coach wrong,
right,
then you could tank. You got to tank very carefully, right? Very carefully. Brad Holmes did it perfect. No one's going to do it better than Brad Holmes. Kept his job. Now they're a juggernaut. But Ryan Poles, it's looking like I think this is one of those things where Eberfluss gets pulled off the side of the cliff by Shane Waldron, who then both of them pull then Ryan Poles off the cliff. That's my worry for Ryan Poles. I like Ryan Poles, but I think this could cost him.
Yeah. If you're a Bears fan, what you're worried about is that any of these people are going to be in the organization next year. I mean, that's it. And I think the problem, Matt, is that this is another one of those old school organizations like Green Bay, where they're very this, this is the other end of the, and it's about polls. This is the other end of the poll from, David Tepper or Woody Johnson, or an owner who wants to, Jerry Jones, who wants to meddle in everything and makes these big sweeping changes that also create bad outcomes. But is it still Ted Phillips? I don't know, my brain. But it's like a sort of like the McCaskey family has like a representative kind of, but they're not that involved. So they don't, and even the way they've done this incrementally, right? It's like a coach, then a quarterback, then a GM. Why not everybody at once? Why not get everybody picked together and make one plan in the same year? So you're right. And you hope that it just gets dynamited. And
this is perfect, though. I mean, because remember, they were 4-4. So having this loss at home, this bad, to a team that was projected to have the number 1 pick in the draft,
right?
It's the best thing that we could have hoped for. I mean, we basically had a loss. We all have to eat the loss, right? Some of us started Roma Dunze. Whoops, right? DJ Moore was a start. Whoops. DeAndre Swift. Whoops. You had to start DeAndre Swift. I mean, whoops, right? It happens. But you take the pain, and hopefully this will speed up the process, because now he's answering questions like, we're looking at everything. We're looking at the play calling. We're looking at everything. Everything's under review. It's like, oh, they're 4-5 and they're reviewing everything. That's a good place to be. You want to be there because you just want to expedite the process of getting these guys out of there.
And for this season, if you want Walden to get fired, or at least you want him to hear that he has to step down as play caller. Now you have hope. And I think even just as a placebo for the team, for the offense, just sometimes you just need to change things for the sake of changing things. And then now you're thinking about DJ Moore and DeAndre Swift. Like you said, he's more like you're going to keep him in your lineup until he lets you down 2 or 3 weeks in a row. Maybe there's something there with the Dunze. Maybe there ends up being something there with Keenan Allen or Caleb Williams. I mean, the Makins are there. But 6 of their last 8 games are NFC North. So Detroit, Minnesota, and Green Bay defenses, and then San Francisco and Seattle, I think, are the other 2 games. So I hope they make some changes, because I think we could end up at a place where we don't want to play any Bears at all.
No.
And then and then for the team, that discouraging feeling just starts to set in. It starts to become like a culture. Well, this whole thing is, I think, a larger story of like, what's stronger, Caleb Williams' aura, or the Bears, the weight of the Bears history as a franchise in this era where, I mean, why is it considered so mystical, like the idea of the Bears actually getting a good quarterback, right? I think that's your key to, like, that story at this moment is stronger than Caleb Williams' story. But there's many chapters to be written.
One year they're going to have a quarterback with 4,000 yards. One of these years. One of these years, it's going to happen.
I have a dream.
It's going to happen. I have a dream. I feel very proud. Like, sometimes we look at our dynasty rankings on Player Profiler, and you can be very proud of certain things that we preemptively pushed Drake Maye ahead of Caleb Williams. I think that feels good. I feel proud about that. Do you think that's too early, or do you think that's right? How do you feel about that?
No, I think that's right, because what's really neat about Drake Maye is you're seeing him aggressive-minded as a runner, very athletic. You're seeing him very much staying in passer-first mentality outside of structure. In terms of the offensive line and the targets he has, I mean, he's at a disadvantage, a massive disadvantage right now compared to the average surroundings a quarterback has.
And compared to Caleb Williams.
Sure, absolutely, right. So exactly, you can do these thought experiments where you swap teams. We did this with CJ Stroud and Bryce Young last year, right? Is it the organization or is it the quarterback? Can the quarterback change the destiny of the organization, or is it just the organization and the personnel? And nobody could succeed in that situation. So yeah, I mean, I think Drake Maye is really exciting, and he's somewhere on that Justin Herbert, Josh Allen axis, where you have the ability, you can have an outburst of rushing ability. You can have a game he takes over as a passer. 35 points is within his range of outcomes in typical scoring systems. And I think what's right now, this game was such a cakewalk. And the other thing is exciting about Drake Maye is the game's not too big for him, and he seems to be growing and learning. This is what was supposed to happen. I'm going to answer one of the questions you had on the show sheet right now. I say it was supposed to happen with Anthony Richardson. Maybe it still will, maybe on another team. But with Maye, as opposed to Caleb Williams, because Caleb Williams isn't having that incremental stair step kind of growth that we want to see in a rookie year. It's a very choppy ride. But Drake Maye, I think it's exciting, and they're going to have games where they're going to have to pass, like against the Rams this week, for instance. That's going to be a game where he's going to get a chance to make those plays outside of structure. And the play that he made to send the game to overtime against Tennessee was one of the plays of the year. I mean, he was playing 10 on 11. Hunter Henry was in the outside of the end zone. And I mean, we've seen, the plays that Baker Mayfield made on back-to-back plays yesterday. I know that we're bemoaning quarterback play at times, but still there's just such an amazing, inspiring play on a game in a moment-to-moment basis where these quarterbacks are transcending themselves. And that's what you want to see in a rookie's growth, is this idea that he's learning what he's capable of, and it's a lot.
And with Baker Mayfield, he doesn't have any receivers left.
Right.
We're talking about Sterling Shepard, right? And it turns out receivers matter. And you can put up 25 fantasy points a game when your receivers are Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and that's going to drop to 15 if it's Trey Palmer and Sterling Shepard. That's just the way it is. That they matter a lot, especially for the sub-elite quarterbacks, especially those that aren't running for 2 touchdowns. They're going to be much more dependent on their receivers, and that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. It's almost always quarterback-centric analysis. Instead of, well, how much are these receivers helping the quarterback? Turn out a lot, right? And of course, both Rachaad White and Bucky Irving can get there. If there are no other receiving options, then Rachaad White's your best receiver. And if your best receiver is a running back, even if he's not getting the majority of the carries, he can get there, and you can get Bucky Irving with a long touchdown, something like that. So I think that Baker Mayfield, it's just a great experiment where you have a guy with one of the best wide receiver duos in the league, and then a few weeks later, you have him with nobody. And what's the difference? And the difference turns out to be about 10 fantasy points.
Right.
I haven't seen a better experiment around the value of wide receivers yet, and so this is a cool thing to have happened.
Yeah, earlier this year, there was a couple of weeks that you might have considered putting Jalen Hurts on your bench when A.J. Brown was out. And I think Devontae Smith got a little banged up. There was one game, I think, that Dallas Goedert ended up being the number 1 receiver, and he had like a ridiculous stat line. Maybe the best stat line any tight ends had this year.
Incredible.
But he wasn't startable during that time. And then, A.J. Brown's back, and it does make all the difference. Although I do think that from a larger analysis point of view, I want to commend Liam Coen. And I think it shows just the mind meld. I keep coming back to Matt that Liam Coen said he took this job because he wanted to work with Baker Mayfield again. And that's where the Baker Mayfield comeback story starts, is with Liam Coen and the Rams. And they were competitive against the 49ers, and they were competitive against Kansas City without those receivers. So we can say, okay, for fantasy, what really matters, our very unserious endeavor, it's bad. But that the team is still competitive. And that Baker Mayfield really showing, again, in those 2 plays on that drive to tie the game, almost game-winning drive yesterday, really showing just the amount, how, like, whatever, because in some ways you go back to, like, Monty Python, Holy Grail, what was it, like the Black Knight, whichever one, it's like, cut his arms, I'm still fighting. And then, a couple of their arms were cut off, but they actually landed some blows. They actually made it a pretty thrilling fight.
Yeah, they did.
And against good teams, against the 2 Super Bowl teams from last year.
They lost by 3. It was a great game.
Yeah, and they had to lose in overtime to Kansas City. So I guess the bottom line is, number 1, Baker Mayfield has arrived as a legit good quarterback.
Oh, yes.
He's here to stay as a good quarterback. His contract's a bargain. His contract is an absolute, what are they paying, like 30-some million? It's an absolute bargain. If his contract was coming this year, he'd be a $50 million quarterback. And if Mike Evans is back after the bye, which he should be, I still think this can be an overachieving offense, because if you might look up Tampa Bay's remaining schedule to say, well, who's going to get to pick on their pass defense? And you're going to be disappointed, because it's like the Giants, Vegas, Carolina twice, Dallas, New Orleans. I think there's maybe like one game against a good quarterback they have left. I think it's maybe the Chargers, but don't quote me on that. But that means that this offense is going to get to pick on those defenses. Carolina, again, Dallas, Giants, Vegas. So this is still an offense that can do some good things for us before the end of the season.
I mean, we've had first overall picks bust and then come back and find a second life, whether it be Baker Mayfield, whether it be Jared Goff, top 5 picks, Sam Darnold, he's back. Geno's back. I mean, so many of these quarterbacks have washed out in one location and then they wash ashore somewhere else. And now they're Jared Goff. He's now in his 30s and he's a top 20 dynasty quarterback. Certainly in single quarterback for sure. What does this mean, though, for Anthony Richardson? Anthony Richardson, top 5 pick. Anthony Richardson, it's not, as we said, not over. Just because you wash out one location, you can end up somewhere else. But we've also seen quarterbacks that have washed out permanently because just for whatever reason, it's not working. Like there's something missing with the way they're surveying the field. There's something with their decision-making and who they're deciding to throw the ball to in particular moments. I don't know. I don't know what it is. All I know is Anthony Richardson has one of the best deep balls in the sport. That has a lot of value. Where do you see him and his career playing out? Because Colts just lost again. And I can see him being back for the fantasy playoffs.
Oh, if not in week 12, depending on how Flacco plays against the Jets. You would think, although the Colts have got themselves in quite a bind here, and this is one of those situations where probably, and again, I think it's perfect that the emblematic American sport, there's always the layer to it of like, but will the billionaire meddle with the operations? Because we can't say exactly where the decision to bench Richardson came from or why they benched him. Maybe it's because he tapped out. Maybe it's because the owner said. Maybe it's because the other players felt like we're, like Bryce Young, like we can't be laying it all out there when we don't have a chance to win because this guy's so inaccurate. Although in the last game he played before he was benched, he was much more accurate than his numbers indicated.
That's
right.
Let
down by some drops or some good defensive plays.
That's correct.
So it could have been tapping out, could have been a number of things, but now you're complicating the decision. I do think that the players will welcome him back. I mean, Quentin Nelson, and look, I don't know, I'm not in the locker room with the Colts, but I would imagine that Quentin Nelson is among the leaders of the team. One of the most respected, like one of the people in the locker room that the young players was like, well, Quentin Nelson said. And Quentin Nelson's a big Anthony Richardson fan, and he seemed to indicate as much as you can as a player that maybe he didn't agree with the decision. So I hope that comes back.
That's great for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I think it is too. Now, Shane Steichen, and this is the other thing too, is like, well, and we have this bias. Matt, back when I was doing a lot of draft stuff, people will be like, well, your job's not on the line if you make a wrong decision. Then, why should I listen to you and what you have to say? But the bias of having your job on the line is not a good bias. It makes people gravitate to defensible decisions, like the easiest decisions to explain, safe decisions. So who knows what's going on there? But you just hope, whether it's with Shane Steichen or just a second team, that it's somebody, because you said the deep ball, right? And they were letting him run. I mean, what was beautiful about this is that it seemed like when the Colts took him, what was it, number 4 overall, that they understood who he was, and they wanted to develop a quarterback in his mold and develop an offense, create an offense around that kind of quarterback. And even having him throw downfield as much as he did indicated a sense of like, I mean, you want to see that your organization has clarity about what your quarterback can actually do well and what they don't do well, and actually just set them up for success and not for failure. And it seemed like that was all in place. And then he got hurt. He was actually coming along last year. It was a very small sample size, but his development did seem to be like he was getting the game. One of the games he got hurt, I think they scored 2 touchdowns, went right down the field. So you hope that the organization is behind him, whether it's in Indianapolis or the second organization. But you can also see a quarterback like him come and drift. Now, the other side of this story, as you bring these redemption stories up, is Malik Willis. I'm going to be really interested to see how Malik Willis is received in free agency 2 years from now, because Matt LaFleur has shown, like, hey, there's stuff here to work with.
Absolutely.
And he's shown that he can play within structure. So
yeah,
the arcs of these quarterbacks, I think one of the mistakes we make in fantasy football is we think of everything in terms of this incremental linear growth, but there's these wild inflection points. Like, it can all change in an instant, and it's changed poorly for Anthony Richardson, but it can change back.
I think Desmond Ridder could screw over the Raiders. I think he's too good.
Mess around and win a game or two or three.
Right, he's going to mess around and win some games, especially running a 4-5. The guy can scramble and sustain drives. He's an upgrade. He's a clear upgrade. So you got to be careful what you wish for with your upgrading. The Cowboys play the Giants and the Panthers in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, right.
The Cowboys are my dark horse to draft 101.
Right, not win another game, right? And if there's an organization, because we all saw this when the veil was pulled back with Stephen Ross. It's funny how we can just kind of, it's like Otani's translator, right? We're just like, well, it's kind of inconvenient to think about what what the implications are if I really accept this as true. So I'm just going to move along. But, when Brian Flores says he was told, there's a bonus for losing and things, like, you think that's not happening? You think that was like something Brian Flores made up to make Stephen Ross look bad?
Knows that they need to be losing and doesn't,
and an owner who would go to the locker room and say, "We're going to lose
no matter what." It's not like it's not like it's going to hurt the brand.
No, I mean, that's why it's one of the most valuable franchises. And there's cracks showing, right? Because, Micah Parsons coming out and saying, you hear coaches call out, like Doug Peterson's been doing this way too often. Like, you hear coaches put it on the players, and we don't like it. We cringe. Even if it's on the players, you don't publicly put it on the players of your coach. Rarely do you have a player putting it on the coach. Where are things at when the player is talking to the media and saying, I just feel bad for the players that work hard, not like our coach?
So Mike McCarthy's still the coach of the Cowboys. You know that? Did you realize that?
As of today, I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things at any moment.
As of this moment, for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Coach of the Cowboys.
Who could have foreseen that going so wrong? That was something out of it, right? Well, seriously, in the dang old introductory interview, Jerry's like, and he watched every game on his year off. And he's like, well, actually, I kind of made that up.
What a joke!
That really happened
in
his introductory press conference.
Yeah. I know. It's I'm of two minds, because I really want to see what this Colts receiving core can do, because Adonai Mitchell's there and he was 6 for 6 and he's looking like just the better receiver between him and Xavier Worthy. He has similar production at Texas. And even with Michael Pittman with a bad back, it's given an opportunity for him and Alec Pierce and especially Josh Downs to really show out. I love Josh Downs. I loved him at UNC. I was surprised when he came out early. I was like, man, guys like this that are 5'9", 170, they just don't come out early that often. What does he have? And then boom, second round. Okay, great. Second round pick. Turns out he was right. He bettered himself and was correct. And now you look up and like, oh, wow, this is like a Devontae Smith situation where it doesn't have a lot of impressive physical traits, just understands how to be a professional wide receiver at the highest level of getting open, securing the football, all those things you want to do. It's a very intriguing wide receiver core, especially now they have Adonai Mitchell. Where does Michael Pittman fit in? Why don't they trade him? They probably should trade him now that you've seen Adonai Mitchell step up so well and the emergence of Josh Downs. I think it's over. I think the days when Michael Pittman was the number one target earner among the wide receivers is over with Josh Downs. So then where does he even fit in? It's just an interesting wide receiver core to think about.
Yeah, he doesn't fit, especially Anthony Richardson offense, because what Michael Pittman can do is win on 3rd and 7. when you want someone to just win the route, win the ball in the air, but he's not a dynamic player like the other three players that you mentioned. He's not a player that makes field flipping plays. He's a player that sustains drives. And I agree with you.
Yeah, he's best for. He's a great match for some pocket passer somewhere.
Right, like a timing based passing offense. Yeah. Or even a quarterback that likes to throw like back shoulders, like Aaron Rodgers. But that being said, I mean, I agree with you. An AD Mitchell story is great because, I mean, Chris Ballard, I think, resorted to some profanity, saying, like, defending him after the draft. And there was a lot of interesting stuff about Mitchell. It wasn't that different, the tenor and tone of it, from the stuff about Jermaine Burton. And we're watching that whole thing play out with Cincinnati. But I think that he was a little inconsistent at the beginning of the season. But like you said, 6 for 6 on the targets, and he's so physically dynamic. And you compare him to Xavier Worthy, and I think the difference is maybe like competitive toughness, without, for lack of a better way to try to just boil it down to something. And it's exciting. It's exciting to think about what these three guys can do, and Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is, because Jonathan Taylor looks like 2 years ago Jonathan Taylor, when we were like, do you take Taylor or McCaffrey? Like, we were legit asking that question.
These high ankle sprains, they're 6-week injuries, 6 to 8 weeks. That's a high ankle sprain. They're back in 3 weeks, and that's another 3 weeks before you get to see what they can really do again.
Yeah, so I guess it's just sad, right? This is like a tragedy because all this fruit is rotting on the vine because of this quarterback situation.
Yeah, I don't know. I know they're not going to get the targets if they have Anthony Richardson, but if they're going to lose anyway, and none of them were particularly useful. I mean, Adonai Mitchell was. He certainly got there if you were streaming someone deep. I mean, I think the best option was actually Alec Pierce, just based on the Darnell Mooney corollary, where you could stream a guy in flex, and I'd rather stream a guy I know is going to start and has a chance to score a long touchdown at wide receiver than some grinder back that is a lock for 9 fantasy points.
Yeah,
so, I love to see that from Alec Pierce, but I could and never start him again. I'm fine with that. Yeah. That's good. It was a cool thing. The week before, it was Nick Westbrook-Akine. I don't know anyone, and certainly on my starter stream show Sunday morning, no one was talking about Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I got 0 questions about Marquez Valdez-Scantling. That was completely out of nowhere. So, we'll see if he can do it again. I highly, highly doubt it. 3 targets, 25 fantasy points on 3 targets. That's pretty special.
Well, maybe it's just not having the pressure of playing for a team that people expect to win. I mean, I was probably the easiest Saints ticket in a long time, although they got the ding dong, the witch is dead bump, and it was Atlanta, so they're always going to show out for Atlanta, the fans. But playing with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, playing in Green Bay, I always like to tell people, like, 28-3 will get you a handshake and probably someone buy you a beer in New Orleans. Like that, no matter how bad the Saints are, people will always celebrate. You can just say 28-3. If the numbers 2, 8, and 3 in sequence come up on anything, people are like, look, I have a Zulu coconut. If you know Mardi Gras, then you know what that means. With 28-3 right here, I'm looking at right now.
Can you imagine if it was Julian Edelman? I mean, it'd be the bar drinks for free tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think maybe Valdez-Scantling just stopped thinking, and he's an immensely talented player. And now, maybe because everybody has given up on him, he and Derek Carr had a moment. Like, everyone's giving up on me too. Let's go out and show them.
They were really Rashid Shaheed be doing right now.
Right. Oh
God, he's got to be the most angry injured player.
What
could have been with Rashid Shaheed, man?
Yeah.
Undrafted guy, small school.
Right.
Was just a super dynamic football player in all phases in college. Comes in, underappreciated, and then bang. Right, and so that's the injury. That is the heartbreaking injury of the year. Now, we should talk about the joy of football and the franchises that are doing it right, that are not, cutting their nose off to spite their face because of, some equity holder, meddling, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. Right, each and every year, that's one team you can set your watch by. Front office, coach, players, fans, everything is just going to line up and be quality, 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 quality. I'm enjoying the Ravens, man. I think it's really cool.
Oh, yeah. And for fantasy, sometimes it can remind us how simple this is. It doesn't have to be complicated. The answers can be simple answers for simple reasons. And it's just watching Lamar Jackson and the bind he puts defenses in. Now add the element that Derrick Henry adds. How do defenses answer that? They can't, basically. With Todd Monken, although we all owe Greg Roman an apology, I think. I mean, he did get stale with the Ravens, but what he learned and what you see what they're doing with Justin Herbert, that's a sleeping giant for fantasy right now. And it's about joy. There's excitement there. Jim Harbaugh saying, I just changed his name to Beast Herbert. It's awesome. It's awesome when the coach is a fan.
Dude, Justin Herbert's a buy in Dynasty right now. He could be the best buy of all because everyone's tired of him. Or this is the moment where everyone got tired of him. And you just got done talking about, like, Drake Maye is on the Herbert Allen spectrum. That's the spectrum you want. That's a great spectrum.
Yeah. Right. Because you can get 4 or 5 passing touchdowns, or you can get 80 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown or 2, and maybe both if they're playing the Lions.
Herbert's a 5,000-yard passer, man.
Yeah. And he's just starting to develop with some very young, athletically gifted receivers. They're all getting on the same page.
Yeah, McConkey in year 3? Hell yeah.
Right. And they actually are using Quentin Johnson. Watch out. I mean, it's the Cowboys because Jonathan Mingo wasn't used the right way in Carolina, but that's a whole other conversation. But the Ravens and Todd Monken, I mean, what's going to be interesting this week is facing the Steelers. And I'm a lifelong Steelers fan, Western Pennsylvania born and bred.
So you don't like the Ravens then?
Oh, but I admire them. I mean, the idea always is like, I hate the Ravens, the Ratbirds. I hate them. But if I was a fan of any other team, it'd be the Ravens, right?
There's no other new team that's come along in the last 30 years that has anything close to their aesthetic.
Right. Even Edgar
all
Allan
the other
Poe.
new teams, it's just super lame.
Yeah.
And the Ravens came along, oh great. And then the unfortunate thing is, like, the one thing about the one stain on that franchise that I could even think of is the fact that they stole the intellectual property for their logo and they didn't pay the guy and he had to sue them.
Yeah.
That was bullshit. Did you see the drawing that he submitted?
I mean, I didn't see that, but that's very unsurprising, unfortunately.
I still to this day, I'm like, he's a fan. You're not going to pay him? You use his logo, a direct facsimile of his logo.
Right.
And that's what you used for the brand of a franchise that's worth, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not $1 billion.
Right.
You're going to give him zero? You could have just given him season tickets, whatever it is. I'm sure he would have appreciated it. But good for him suing.
Yeah, well, and this is the league that actually went after, like, old folks' homes for having Super Bowl parties and really are trying to crack down on their intellectual property. So, I mean, it's just
that's a great point. That's another layer of irony that this happens to be the NFL, which are like the senior policemen of intellectual property.
I'll tell a little story since I mentioned Mark Folletti. When Mark and Cecil and I were doing Draft Guys TV, this little internet, the first time they tried to make internet TV, I think, back in 2007. It's another story. But the NFL kind of ran the Senior Bowl, or at least the broadcasting side of it. I think the NFL Network at that time was already broadcasting it or something like that. I don't know. But you had to sign something, that you weren't going to put any footage up. And we got footage, whoever was at the Senior Bowl. And I think Mark, because he was a whiz, put it up instantly. And Matt, before we got back to the hotel, they had called us and said, that needs to come down or you're never going to be allowed to come to the Senior Bowl again. That's how, who's there watching these things? You know what I mean? Like that quick. So yeah, the NFL looks after their interests, and we're lucky that they let us do fantasy football, probably because somebody smartly came to them and said, like, no, let them do fantasy football because it's good for us, because it's actually going to make us richer, because it is the main driver, I think, of interest in the league as far as growth over the last 10, 15 years.
I just showed it on the screen.
Yeah.
The two logos. Some bullshit right there. Some bullshit. But they make great
deep
decisions.
Pockets, baby. Deep pockets can afford to outlast you.
But I mean, in my history as a football fan, I don't think I can think of a better signing just in terms of fit, culture, style, need, everything. Derrick Henry.
Destiny.
Right, destiny. The fact that Derrick Henry in some drafts was lasting into the third round, I think everyone should be embarrassed about that.
Right.
It was the no-brainer of no-brainers to draft Derrick Henry. Oh, he's on the Ravens now? I mean, we talk about the Alfred Morris corollary where that grinder back is going to get a little bit more room to operate because defenses are spying on the quarterback. So he's going to get that extra half step to go whatever direction he wants to go. You give Derrick Henry that. You make linebackers think twice. Who has the football? I mean, that's 5 yards a carry plus. Lock it in. That's lock it in more long runs. And it's just so perfect. They don't throw to the running back anyway, except a couple designed runs. And who's best in the screen game on these designed runs than Derrick Henry? It's a nightmare. It's like the most perfect fit ever. And, you know, we'll be talking about this for years, what a no-brainer it was. And you know the ADP on Derrick Henry in 2024? Right. Can you believe that was a thing? Yeah, that was a thing. That was crazy. Right? So, but now they lose J.K. Dobbins, right? So they're like, okay, we're gonna let J.K. Dobbins go because we can get Derrick Henry. Did you happen to trade any J.K. Dobbins in any format prior to this past Sunday?
If I had, I might have considered it. But I was taking Kamani Vidal in the offseason, and it's great. And what I say every time we talk about,
you should have been. Right. Theo, my co-host on the Sonic Truth the Dynasty podcast, he laid out a trade where he actually did give up J.K. Dobbins, and he market timed it. And whenever you can outline a real trade like that in essentially real time for people, they love that shit. Like that's one of the great things about Theo is that he's such a volume player, even in dynasties and some of these FFPC dynasty leagues, that he typically will always have a trade that he can cite about most players, and it's an incredible resource.
He and I just did a trade in a league that we're in together.
Shut up! What was it?
Yeah. I gave him Deontay Johnson. He gave me Courtland Sutton.
Ooh, Courtland Sutton. I mean, how underrated is Courtland Sutton?
Exactly. Thank you. How overrated is Deontay Johnson? I say this as a lifelong Steelers fan.
I mean, I don't know.
Sorry, but Theo's great.
Was this pre or post trade?
It was post trade to the Ravens, but it was pre this week.
Trade.
It was last week. But you know, Theo right now is handing it to me. We're in Pros versus Joes together, and we're neck and neck at the top of that. Theo's great. He's a great fantasy player.
Oh, he's one of the best. Yeah.
And I think you're right that it's good to try things. And the idea that I keep coming back to, Matt, this year, and it really started to germinate in my head over the last couple of years, is when it's time to trade, it's just like ADP. Don't get hung up on market value. Because if you're feeling an inclination to trade it for a player or trade a player away, chances are 95% or more of the trades are either going to look good or look bad. Worrying about at the margin, like worrying about, this player's worth 30 units, so I should only try to give up 30 units or something around 30 units in this trade. Right. Look, a lot of these players, like next month, are going to be worth 15 units or 50 units. So whether you give up 27 or 33 or 31 or as a second round pick or a third round pick, if you're right, it's not going to matter. And if you're wrong, it's not going to matter. And trades release endorphins anyway. So make trades.
Trades release endorphins, and it sounds like you're a buy high guy. I love that.
Well, that's the thing. I've been doing buy low, sell high at Football Guys for a long time. That was the first column I did at Football Guys. I don't even know how long ago it was. And it's very much turned into buy high and sell low because everybody knows the buy low and sell high now. The information is level. There was a time, Matt, that information advantages helped you win leagues. There is no information advantage anymore. If anything, you can get lost in the forest information, and information can lead you astray. And that's right. That's right. I mean, I really should say, unironically, sign up for our newsletter.
You should. Sign up for the Football Guys newsletter. Just go to Google, type in Football Guys newsletter.
Yeah. I mean, we do our takes on the news of the day. But now you get back to, like, as the kids would say, like, no one ball, and that's still what it comes back to. And I think that buying high and selling low is where it's at, because probably the biggest advantage you can exploit, especially in the first few weeks of the season, is that most people want more evidence. They want more evidence. Like, okay, that happened, but I want more evidence. And the NFL is full of variance, and you will get caught with your pants down sometimes, making decisive moves based on one game or even anticipation of something that hasn't happened yet. But often, like, that's the thing. 100% of trades where Derrick Henry changed teams in Dynasty leagues this offseason, Matt, 100% of those teams won the trade. I don't care. Show me the largest amount someone gave up for Derrick Henry in the offseason. They won the trade. Any trade that rational actors would have made, the Derrick Henry. So it wasn't about, because there's so many trades I've regretted because I got caught up at the margin. And I was like, well, am I really, am I giving up too much for this guy? Could I get more for this player if I trade him to this? Maybe he'll do better next week and I can get. And then I regret not being decisive and not closing the deal by giving up a little more or accepting a little less, because then the window closes. Because there is that period between, say, week 1 and week 2 of a trend when people say, I want more evidence before I act on it. And if you can be bold enough, and this is a meta thing, because why am I sitting here talking to you right now? Partially because we decided to try to be fantasy football analysts before that was a thing, before that was even a profession. So if you are willing to take the risk before other people see that it's a risk worth taking, that's everything.
I love it. How do you feel about Audric Estime?
It's where I'm interested. I'm interested because Denver had a legit game. I know they lost. By the way, I want to say, I hope that I'm not alone, that I really would have been more surprised if Will Lutz just hit a routine field goal on that play. I've been watching the Chiefs this year. I see what the NFL writers are doing. It felt so unsurprising that kick was blocked. And it would have been so much more surprising to watch the Broncos celebrate a win in that moment. But still, the Broncos, that's for the first time this year, Matt, I watched them, like, they're a legit team. You can't say it's the opponents or something like the afternoon they caught a team on or something like that. They played Kansas City toe-to-toe in that game. And their defense is good, overachieving. They haven't been able to establish the run, but that Sean Payton is all about that. They made a lot of moves on the offensive line. Like, you get Mike McGlinchey when you want to run the ball. I mean, it's just like, this is what they want to do. Adam Troutman, et cetera, et cetera. So Audric Estime is kind of like what they wanted Javonte Williams to be, right? I've made the point, Matt, that
I looked for an injury. Was there an injury to Javonte Williams?
No, I just think that Estime.
I was searching and searching for an injury to Javonte Williams. I thought for sure there had to be one.
Well, it's because a few times we've heard this is the week that Estime is going to get a longer look, and it hasn't happened. Right. So then you start to tune it out. You're like, well, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Well, we saw it, and Estime is the kind of runner that, I mean, hey, 30 years ago he might have been a second-round pick. He's an economical runner, physical, gets downhill quickly, runs the play the way it's supposed to be run. Runs every carry like his life depends on it. That's catnip for a coach like Sean Payton. The defense is going to set them up with competitive game scripts. He's fresh. One of the reasons that these backup running backs that become starters in November, December win leagues for us is because they're fresh and the defenses are not. So I'm in. I mean, I think Estime, if you've been sitting on the number one waiver priority, if you have the hammer because you have like some of the most bucks, then use it, because there might not be another ship that comes in.
Do you think Roschon Johnson could be part of the shakeup in Chicago in a similar way?
I mean, Swift's been one of the only good things about the offense. I
think Swift's been playing too well for them to do that.
Yeah, I mean, Swift actually has made them look smart for running out and getting him as the first signing of free agency, if I recall correctly, like the first signing that was announced. And he's been explosive and he's stayed healthy. He hasn't hasn't gone on the wrong side of the coaches. Because in Detroit, it seemed like it just never clicked. For whatever reason, he wasn't a Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes pick. But they were open to embracing him, and it just never, I think, clicked there. But I think Swift's a sell, absolutely. And if Shane Waldron gets fired and somebody sprinkles some magic dust on the offense, maybe it'll look bad for selling Swift right now. but
I'm a little nervous for him.
In dynasty leagues especially, because I mean, this is a sell low, right? Because he's coming off of a bad game in terms of fantasy, but you still have this runway of all these great games coming into this game, and I think people don't the edges in fantasy are back to the simple things now, Matt. Like just look at the schedule again: 6 games against NFC North opponents left this year. One of them is week 18, but you get it. San Francisco, that's not an easy draw. This whole offense,
the Vikings defense is a problem for their offense at this point.
Right.
When Darnold and Jones and Jefferson combine for 25 fantasy points, that's a problem, Sig.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that too, because Kirk Cousins complained about Brian Flores in practices, that his defense was so complex and so harassing that how can you practice offense? How can you learn the offense when you're going up against this defense in practice?
I did not know that. That's great info.
Yeah. But he eventually did say, well, but it has me ready for anything in the game. So, but you're not going to tell Brian Flores to take his foot off the gas in any possible fashion. And so, yeah, I don't remember which of their division opponents they play in week 18, but you're going to have 5 games against Detroit. And Detroit's defense continues under Aaron Glenn to find their way. You really saw them course correct in the second half last week, and that's without Aiden Hutchinson. So I think you're going to see that. I think they might get Emmanuel Mosley back pretty soon. He's good. He's a good corner. He just can't stay healthy. I think Chicago's offense is like in the ditch on the side of the road right now, and maybe firing Shane Waldron will be the tow truck. But a lot of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in fantasy is when I think a trend is going to reverse. When I'm like, no, we're going to hit the inflection point. You want to see the inflection point before it comes, because that's the most brilliant move. But I talk myself into too many things with wishful thinking.
Yeah, if you're going to buy low, that's more of a dynasty thing than a season-long thing. So if you're doing a single season managed league, buying Roma Dunze right now is a lot of wish casting, whereas trading for him in dynasty is like one of the most locked in great ideas. If you can pull it off. I mean, you're probably, the problem is, so whoever drafted Roma Dunze is a Roma Dunze fan. And they know that Caleb Williams is a rookie, and he's a rookie, and they're about to change the coaching staff. So it's a real Hail Mary to get Roma Dunze right now. But if you can, you should. And yet, in a single season managed league, don't even bother.
An anchor, not in a good way.
It's not a good thing.
And to your point, because I was going to say, if you took Roma Dunze and you're willing to trade him, again, you're probably going to lose the trade if it's another rational actor on the other end takes it. But the value of asking is that you lay the groundwork for eventually, maybe in the offseason, maybe sometime next year when he tears the ACL or something. I'm not putting that on the universe. I'm just saying, like, something could happen, and they're going to remember, this is a team that was interested in Roma Dunze. So it's always good to let people know when you covet their players.
That's right. Now, Chuba Hubbard, I think he hurt his knee, but thankfully he returned to the game, right? So, 150 yards, a touchdown, big new contract. You know how they sometimes will show the face of somebody in the crowd who's unhappy with what's going on, right? It's always the best, right? It's always the best whenever, especially like if some politician's making a speech and somehow the person they're talking about is in the crowd and they zoom in on that guy's face and he's pissed. Whenever that happens, it's always great. When they zoom in on the coach's face, when a decision backfires, great. I really wish they could find Jonathan Brooks's face when Chuba Hubbard is, another long run, another touchdown, because they won't do it because most people don't even know what he looks like because these guys wear helmets. Yeah. And he's a rookie and he hasn't had any press as an NFL player since he's arrived in Carolina. So that's not going to work anyway. But for a few fringe, like dynasty leaguers like me, I would find that exceedingly amusing. I think he's great. I think he's fantastic. I really want to see him play. I just think it's super interesting what's happening right now in Carolina because they seem to be, reinventing the D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart Carolina Panthers, where Chuba Hubbard is Jonathan Stewart and Jonathan Brooks is D'Angelo Williams. I'm interested to see how this works. I think it can work. It's certainly working in Detroit, where you have, a satellite back and a grinder, both sharing the fantasy points. But the Panthers ain't the Lions, man.
Yeah, that's the problem, is you're missing the ethos of the team that makes them the point of the spear, and instead this is like, you're trying to get, like, I don't know, the blade of a bulldozer, but it's on a golf cart, so you're not going to move anything with that. There's no culture, there's no oomph right now to make that the like I said, the point of the spear. And I think you're right to bring up D'Angelo and Stewart, and that was also when the Wildcat rose. That was the Panthers and D'Angelo Williams. There was a couple of games there, legit, you were wondering, like, would they be better off just running the Wildcat for the whole? It caught the NFL by surprise a little bit that year, and it started to spread. But
that's right. So that was the NFC team that picked up for what the Dolphins were doing.
Right, Ronnie Brown, exactly, and D'Angelo Williams was good enough in it that you're like, could this be the better, like, Taysom Hill? Right, this is the best default mode for this offense. But
D'Angelo Williams, first round fantasy pick.
Oh yeah, and that was after Jonathan Stewart. That was after the draft, because that's the classic, like, it's motivating, right? So I think that so many other things have to change before they could really unlock the value of that. But you're right that it at least gives you a hint of, if there is a plan, this is what the plan is centered around. And I think the offensive line they have is a pretty good offensive line in terms of run blocking. And now you have Coker and Leggett. There's some makings there of, like, a downfield target of a guy who can make hay after the catch, and Jatavian Sanders in the middle of the field. So all the makings are there. They just need a quarterback, and they need David Tepper to have a come to Jesus moment when he realizes that he needs to stay out of football operations. He just needs to don't hire people to do the job. Let them do their job. And
I think it's very difficult for someone who comes from a competitive Wall Street environment.
Oh yeah,
to come to terms with the fact that we have to lose for 3 straight years and maintain organizational stability. That's the only way where it's going to happen. Sometimes it can happen when, ownership is in transition, or, the owner, the primary equity holder dies and passes it to someone in the family who's a little less engaged, and that can give a respite to the front office, a couple years where they can kind of, feel like no one's going to bother them. And they can rebuild the franchise the right way. But we saw it in Cleveland. I mean, not going to happen, right? Equity holders will come in and they will ruin it. And they will go behind your back and negotiate the worst quarterback contract of all time. They will ruin it. For most of the time, it's going to get ruined. Again, what we're seeing with these Lions is super rare. Try to explain this to people. The rebuilding perfectly, I could write it on a single note card, right? I can write the plan out on a single note card. And if you follow these precepts, you will rebuild like the Lions. And good luck doing it.
Yeah, well, I think that it's funny, because I can tell a funny story about Cecil Lammy, my co-host right here, where one time, I think it was the Shrine game, might have been the Senior Bowl, we were on the sidelines watching the practices, and this was when Matt Millen was the GM of the Lions, and he was dunking on Matt Millen, and who was standing right next to us. Oh, hi, Mr. Millen. How are you? And I mean, it was perfect, really. Instant karma, right?
Great. That is so great.
The joke that was, the joke that people, because that was one for a few years. We were like, why won't they fire Matt Millen? Why won't they fire Matt Millen? Why won't they fire Matt Millen? And the rumor was that he sat down with whoever the scion of the family. It might have been Sheila. I don't remember who it was that was in charge of, like, it was representing the Ford family at that point.
Right.
But it was like that he would sit down with them and watch the game with them after the game.
Oh, right.
And
Walk him through
explain
it. Show what a
everything.
genius he is. How
Yeah.
well he knows the game.
And just take the time. Just take the time to be, let me
put the
do
time in.
what happened. Yeah, you want to what happened with the team this week? This is what happened with the team this week.
Smart.
And it was more of like a human thing, right?
Oh, but that's smart though.
It's totally smart.
Super smart.
And maybe, and the Ford family, and again, I think the Ford family has no intent or desire to meddle in football affairs. They just want a good team. They just want to win. I mean, it's actually kind of quaint now to think of owners that's just like, well, we just want to win, but not we think, because I think the problem with David Tepper is when someone makes $1 billion in America today, they think, well, I've just figured out the world. I'm some sort of pharaoh.
Oh,
you know.
No,
and
he's actually it's such a different thing because there's just it's a cartel,
right?
32 teams,
yes,
and there's all these advantages, information advantages, funding advantages, all these things you can get in corporate America are not available to you. It is much more of an even playing field. And so there's not a lot of levers you can pull. And so then he's like, well, there's got to be something I can do to speed this process up.
Right.
And it's like one of those finger traps where the more you try to pull and make it happen with your testosterone,
right,
the less the team is going to succeed.
Yes.
You need to just sink into the losing.
Right. Well, or to put it in a different term, I remember in between law school and fantasy football, I worked at the University of Texas as a systems analyst. And one of the things they taught you in SY 101, because it was actually a program where you learned how to be an IT professional. Like they thought if you aced an aptitude test and you were a person that could communicate, was somewhat, the winsome was the word that Randy Abling always used when they would try to pick out. So it was because I graduated from law school and didn't want to be a lawyer. What was I going to do? Well, this is when the first tech boom was happening, the year 2000. Austin had all this latent mental faculties that weren't being used, and the Silicon Valley started to kind of reach down to Austin, and there were companies setting up. And then that was brain draining the university, who always had an in-house IT team building everything for the University of Texas. Because in Texas, going back to what we were talking about earlier, they do it their own way, and that's just how it is. And that's just part of Texas. And they explain in SY 101 that it does, even if you have 9 people, like 9 people can't make it take 1 month to make a baby. It takes 9 months. So throwing more people at a problem.
Winning a Super Bowl is like having a baby. Like there's no way to speed this shit up. It's so true. There is. The Rams did it, right? It is possible to microwave a Super Bowl. It is.
Well, a midwife can induce labor.
Right. It is possible, but it's real. It's just not it, man. I mean, there's a long list of broken down cars on the side of the road that are teams that try to microwave a Super Bowl. You maybe could get a staffer at just the right time with McVay, just the right time with Aaron Donald, just the right moment in time. But I said it when it happened on the Decision Point show with Anand Nanduri. I said, this is bad. This is a bad precedent to set. Teams are going to think this is the way to do it, and you're going to, you can go to New Orleans and see the other way it can go, right? Where now you're underwater and the whole roster needs to be purged, and you're going to be facing 5 years of losing. And if there's a team in the NFL that has no hope of turning it around anytime soon with the ultimate purgatory quarterback right now, it's the Saints. And it all goes back to all the draft pick trading and all the nonsense contracts and all the salary cap shenanigans, right? All the converting salary into a bonus that they were doing to push off the cap hit another year, and now it has to come due, and they have to take the pain. So it's the Detroit Lions are our Lions for
Mhm.
this reason, that they built it the right way. And there's a question in the chat that I really want to answer because, once in a while we get a really good question in the chat. There's a lot of great stuff in the chat. First of all, just a lot of great comments. I'm sharing as many as I can on the screen. Shaka Zulu 12.
Mhm.
Buy high on Cooper Kupp or buy low on Puka right now?
Oh, I think you're going to buy low on Puka here. And there's always the risk of the bottom dropping out because Greg Rosenthal, I love Greg. Greg's one of our leaders. He said something real like, I wouldn't draft Puka Nacua. And then he just, I'm not going to say anything else about it. This was before.
Oh, super cryptic?
Yeah. Just like, Well, I like giving him, some business, saying, what did Greg
He's based in
know?
LA, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he works for the NFL. So what did Greg Rosenthal know and when did he know it? So, but Puka looked like good old Puka before he threw the punch last week, the week before that. And here's the thing. Puka is on that Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson kind of path. And I don't mean he's going to necessarily equal them statistically, but these guys do get better. I mean, generally, when a player, with the exception of like Tampa, Mike Williams, I don't know what happened there. But generally, when a rookie receiver, Randy Moss, whatever, when they storm on the scene as a rookie, like when what they do and what they got to offer, the NFL's like, geez, well, we don't even really. And also remember, that means the coach is deploying them the right way. It means the quarterback is on the same page as them. It can get better. It can get even better. So I think you're seeing that happening if he stays healthy. And I think Cooper Kupp is in a pretty defined role. Now, putting the chip on Kupp is putting the chip on Nacua's knees, just something's wrong with it. And they can like get baling wire and duct tape and keep it together for a couple of weeks. And then something's going to happen again. Remember, something happened in practice. We weren't even there. He's okay. But is that ominous? Is that the kind of thing that you should say, listen to your gut when it flutters and says, that's not right. It's not good. It's not good to hear that happened. So I don't know, but I know that he's a badass. The name I like to bring up because I'm so Steeler centric is Hines Ward. He reminds me of Hines Ward. He's not the most athletic, right? He's not the most athletically gifted receiver. Hines Ward played without an ACL on one of his knees. Not the fastest, not the biggest, not the strongest, not the
he does have those little armbands that he wears around his biceps. So that's how he's an athlete.
Yeah. But I think Puka. I think the Rams are another team that we could be. They're getting 2 offensive linemen back tonight, Avila and Jackson. And remember, it was apocalypse on their offensive line early in the year. So and then Nacua went out and so on and so forth. And now we're all the way back to this maybe being one of the soaring offenses that we're going to talk about the way we were just talking about the Ravens.
And Puka has the long hair too.
Oh yeah, I mean
he looks glorious.
He's a hero. I mean, he's like, there's a reason people are saying, who's the next Puka Nacua? I mean, it's telling you that there's not someone that's, I mean, I know it's comparing him to Hines Ward, but like, he's establishing a story that is just his story to come in as a 5th round pick. And all the writing was on the wall from the moment he showed up at the building. They were talking about him. Players were talking about him. Beat writers were talking about him. Coaches were talking about him. So the indicators are there. We can see this stuff coming.
Would you rather offer a trade based on what you think it would take? Would you offer a trade to acquire Puka right now if you needed wide receiver help, or Malik Neighbors?
Oh my gosh, Puka. I mean, I don't even have to think about that. Here's the thing. We get hung up sometimes on the fact that we talk about fantasy football in terms of a player, okay? And it creates this illusion that the things that cause a player's production are mostly in control of the player. But even when we talk about quarterbacks, Matt, I think we should always be talking about quarterback play caller, right? Because Caleb Williams, because the Bears pass offense / Waldron, I want no part of that.
Right.
/ somebody else, I'm interested. I'm listening.
Well, Dayball's pretty good.
He is, but
Dayball's pretty good. I always say, if I was a general manager, that I would be lurking around Dayball and the Giants front office, hoping that he gets washed out to sea with everybody else. and then I would scoop him up. I'd be the first one
Sure.
in that Coast Guard helicopter to scoop him up out of the ocean. And be
Absolutely.
like, welcome to my team.
Yeah, there's a lot of this. I mean, look, we just talked about Brian Flores. There's a lot of this where a head coach and coordinator are such different jobs that you can be really good at one and even be good at that one while you're a head coach, but still fail as a head coach. Sometimes for reasons that are out of your control, maybe in terms of Daboll. But I mean,
Daboll, I love him, man.
I think
clear on the Hard Knocks show is clearly he's the only one that knew anything.
And unfortunately, he may have planted the seeds of his own demise, because if he hadn't been so effective with Daniel Jones in that first year and got them to the playoffs and won a playoff game, then they never signed Daniel Jones. He's never touched Daniel Jones.
Look at you with the sliding doors of fate. Look at this.
Well, NFL.
Look at this. No, you're making my brain hurt.
The fun thing about the NFL is that that's always happening. There's millions. You talk about the multiverse. There's millions and millions of alternate universes out there. You know, the draft. It's the draft, because during the draft, all kinds of fates of players, coaches, teams pop in and out of reality. Right? I mean, you can change one pick in the top 5, Matt, and how many picks change in the rest of the first round? Maybe half of them.
Dude, now we're talking butterfly effect, and we're really. Yeah, and then all the iterations of the multiverse post butterfly effect. It gets crazy. But yet the NFL draft is the best example of that.
Yeah, it's fun. It's really fun. So but again, in closing, I like what the Rams are doing. So when we think about fantasy production,
what if the Vikings had been able to trade up to get Drake Maye?
Right. Sure. Or the Giant. Right. But all that being said, what Malik Neighbor stands for and what Puka Nacua stands for mostly is going to come down to how successful are the Rams and the Giants going to be at what they're trying to do on the offensive side of the ball. I think you don't even have to think about that. It's right there staring us in the face.
Now, an under-discussed element of Daboll and his quality is how quickly, and this you never see this, man, how quickly he pivoted from the running back that they brought in as the answer, the value running back they brought in as the answer, the guy with the nickname, the guy with the motor, the guy that's pass protecting, the guy that's reliable, ball security, locker room leader. You never see them pivot off of that guy for a day 3 pick, no matter how good that day 3 pick is, this early in the season. And that, to me, is a huge indicator for what Tyrone Tracy is. I'm so excited for Tyrone Tracy. I mean, he is great. But to put it in that kind of context makes him even better. I mean, you could certainly give praise to Brian Daboll for recognizing this and making the move where many coaches wouldn't. Certainly a Mike McCarthy coach would not have done that. But still, what an incredible indicator. And he's, a lightly used race car now. 24 years old.
Right.
He's a full-grown NFL player ready to go. It's just there's a little bit of a difference coming into the league at age 21 versus 24.
And this is a sign that his behind the scenes also, he's doing all the right things to prepare and instilling that trust. Because one of the reasons we feel like I always talked about the assumption of rational coaching. We would always get hung up in fantasy football. What we probably stub our toe on the most is thinking we're watching the games. The coaches are watching the games. They're going to do the right thing. The best players are going to touch the ball the most, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that doesn't always happen. In fact, to the point where, like, as you're saying, it's refreshing when it does. And Tyrone Tracy, for a running back, they want guys that are assignment sound. They want guys that can pass block. They want guys that aren't going to freelance. And so if Tracy's doing that as a rookie, as a converted wide receiver, that's really exciting because, like you said, and then it also is exciting, and it does speak to Daboll as a decision maker because it's so rare. And the comparison, and look, I wanted to say shout out to Lance Zierlein, by the way, who's going into the Texas Radio Hall of Fame. What's up, Lance? And Lance does all of the draft stuff for NFL. When you read his profiles in and of themselves read really well, but really help you get a player. His dad was an offensive line coach in the league. He knows what he's talking about. He's a Renaissance man. Love you, Lance. And he rarely talks to the fantasy football audience. He's talking to the football audience. He's talking to the draft audience. He's talking to the Houston Texans offense. And he said in the draft process, if I was playing fantasy football, I would get Tyrone Tracy. It's the guy. And the comparison, and you don't want to put these lofty comparisons out there, Matt, was David Johnson. I mean, that was the guy. It was like you can watch it. You would watch Tyrone Tracy, be like, "Am I watching David Johnson?" Because we kind of wanted that to happen with Antonio Gibson. But am I watching David Johnson? And in David Johnson's rookie year, and maybe some of this is Bruce Arians, David Johnson, we kept watching, be like, when are they going to give him more touches? Why isn't this guy? Who was he? I don't even remember who it was he had to overtake. My brain is saying like J.J. Arrington or someone like that, but that's probably not right. But my point is that with the first time Tyrone Tracy came along, we were so frustrated.
Ellington? Andre Ellington?
Andre Ellington, yeah. It was another one, but another one of those undersized backs, yeah. And we were so frustrated that Arians, and that just could be Arians' style with a rookie, like you got to earn it. And when you think you got it, nope, you got to earn it another week. You got to earn it another week. Now I'll give it the chance. But Dable accelerated all this stuff with Tyrone Tracy. He could be a league winner. And I mean, if we were to redo Dynasty rookie drafts today, he's the number one running back. If you could trade Jonathan Brooks for Tyrone, I would trade Jonathan Brooks in a second round pick.
Of course.
For Tracy. I might even, it's like, this is what I mean, though. Someone who's like, well, we haven't seen, Brooks is still a mystery box. He might be you were hoping Brooks was going to turn out like what we're watching Tracy do right now.
I mean, Chuba signed a 3-year deal, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd rather have Corum at this point than Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, that's coming. That train's coming.
I like to hear that. Nico Collins train this week? Yes, please.
Yeah, and they're doing the right thing. That was an out-of-conference game. They have, they can back into winning the division. They need to be thinking about January. So I think that's the right thing because it was kind of an innocuous injury. Remember, he scored a long touchdown on the play that he got.
Oh, we played it. I slowed it down, and you could see him kind of pulling up and something was
hitching
wrong.
The giddy up.
Yeah, at the very end, right in the back of the end zone there. But Tank Dell, I still think is a buy low.
Yeah, Collins coming back is going to help him. I mean, I know he had that one game.
Thank you.
Yeah.
God.
I mean, it's not just about cutting up the pie into pieces and how big the pieces are. It's how big the pie is, and the pie is going to get a lot bigger, especially against Dallas this week. Yeah.
Sometimes, listen, some of these sound effects I never get to use. That one was perfect.
That's great.
I have the train horn. I've been wanting to use it.
I'm reminded of Rocky V, whenever Tommy Morrison, rest in peace, is just beating the shit out of Rocky, and Mickey, who's at that time had already joined the Ancestors, appears to Rocky, and he's like, "Get up, you son of a bitch, because Mickey loves you." And then the subway train runs through his head or something like that. Yeah. It's coming.
Did you see that only 5 49ers got targets this past week? Mm-hmm. It's pretty interesting. That offense staying consolidated. All 5, I believe, were somewhere in the teens of fantasy points. Mm-hmm. Kittle had the least yards, but he got the touchdown, and then Jennings had the most yards, but didn't get the touchdown. Everyone, they just allocated all the fantasy points, spread evenly, 5 guys. Juan Jennings already has a 3-touchdown game.
Right.
I love Pearsall, but I think Jennings is the guy and is going to be the more consistent producer. But I like all these. This is pretty exciting stuff to see.
It is.
You never see an offense with only 5 guys targeted, period.
Right. It's funny too, because this is another watch what you wish for moment, because they got Brandon Ayuk signed at the contract that they wanted everyone to think that they put him in a headlock, and he said okay, I'll sign it. But they don't need Brandon Ayuk. They don't know. The contract they needed was the 2-year $13 million deal they gave Jennings. That was all they needed to do.
That was all they needed. And listen, like we talked about, if he lost all of his receivers and he was down to just Jennings, then it would be a problem. But Baker doesn't even have Jennings.
No, he doesn't.
Baker doesn't have Pearsall. Baker's got none of that. So that's why the experiment is so perfect, where in San Francisco, they've got enough talent there where they can sustain injuries, and it's just not that big of a deal. All right, I have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 burning questions.
Lightning round.
10 burning questions for Sigmund Bloom after this. Hey, I know DFS may have peaked, but there are still hundreds of thousands of people to play and millions of dollars up for grabs every week. So let's put our hoodie on and let's talk about Player Profiler's DFS Dominator. It has a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Billy and Theo and Bradley and Evan and that Player Profiler AI engine to create cash game lineups that certainly have a high floor, but also give you that ceiling. Now, you've probably heard about the most powerful tool of all, our Lineup Genius. We know winning GPPs requires a completely different approach, which is why our Lineup Genius takes you through the process of selecting the quarterbacks in the juiciest matchups. Then it highlights the stacks and runbacks that are available, lets you pick the chalk level, lets you pick the level of correlation with a number of other proprietary settings available to you. Click a button and it generates hundreds of lineups to be imported into FanDuel and DraftKings. And it's just $45 a year, not a week, a year. So for that reason alone, if you play DFS, you'd be an idiot not to buy the DFS Dominator. It's a little strong, a couple of idiots. It's not nice. Members of the audience, I don't think you're idiots. This was directed at a very specific subset of people that may not have a particular amount of
people that are still playing DFS.
Everyone's great. Love you all. Yeah. I don't know. It's one of those things where I when I was cutting that promo, I just said that off the cuff, and then I giggled when I was listening to it back, and I knew that I shouldn't keep it in. But then because I giggled, I said, well, if I'm giggling, then other people might think it's funny. And last time I checked, I'm the boss. So if I think it's good and I think it's funny, that's one of the there's these little, micro benefits that I get to leverage as the motherfucking boss, is that I can let that promo get out there in the world, even though if we were doing a focus group of marketing people, they would say that's not a good idea. And my response to that is, too bad. Pound sand, we're going with it. Bijan Robinson, is he the new Christian McCaffrey?
He's the new LaDainian Tomlinson.
Oh, that's better. That's better. That's what he is. He is that. He's now getting that. I love that he's getting all the touches he wants, and they're not giving him the 35 touches in any given game just because. They are making sure that Tyler Algier is keeping him fresh. It's damn amazing the way it's happening, the way it's all playing out.
Absolutely. And Tyler Algier is helping you if you have Bijan Robinson. He gave him 3 chances from the one, and Robinson had to come in on 4th down and finish it yesterday. So it continues to come up Bijan.
Devon Achane or Breece Hall in Dynasty?
My response to this is, somebody make the case for Breece Hall to me. He's headed for lots of uncertainty.
He's going into a time period of maximum uncertainty.
Yeah, so I don't even know what's the case for Breece Hall here. So
it's a pain trade, is what it is, and it's a lot easier to be Devon Achane right now. And if he's just as good of a receiver as Breece Hall, what am I missing? Breece Hall's bigger, right? But here's the thing. Just because you're 218 pounds doesn't mean the NFL sees you as a workhorse. They're not calling plays based on weight numbers, right? For whatever reason, the Shanahan coaching tree no longer cares about weight. They're just going to run these guys out there until the wheels fall off. If they're 190 pounds, so be it. If Raheem Mostert is a special teamer from Purdue, give him 22 carries. Fuck it.
Yeah. No, that's it. And the game is changing. The spacing is changing. I'm old enough to remember whenever people would say a quarterback was not going to work because they only know how to run a college offense. But notice we don't even use the term a college offense anymore because all these things have blended different body types. Yeah, it's just offense. Different body types, different BMIs.
Right.
Are the thresholds are changing. And again, Juan Jennings, I put a dot this eye. He ran a 4. Why did Juan Jennings fall so far in the draft? Why? He ran a 4.7 240. Bucky Irving, Kyron Williams. I mean, we gotta understand that in general, when the NFL takes a player with measurables that we say like that should be like a X, zonk, put him in the dustbin. It's probably because they know how to play football, and that matters.
Well, now Audric Estime.
Right.
Isn't that he's the new one? He's the latest.
Hopefully.
Now, the cool thing about Austin Eckler, what I do love is when you have somehow players with great measurables that slip through the cracks.
Right.
You have Rashid Shaheed, who is super dominant in college, and he's super fast.
Right.
And just because he's from some anonymous school, no one pays attention to him, and he falls out of the draft.
Right.
Austin Eckler went to Western State.
Yeah.
Fell out of the draft. Danny Woodhead fell out of the draft. Plenty of guys that go to, Chadron State, places that really are not on any scouts map. Mm-hmm. They tend to fall out of the draft. And so it's super cool. That's why I always love Aaron Jones, because went to UTEP, but had the measurables of McCaffrey.
Right.
It's just he went to UTEP, and it took him 8 years to finally get the touches he deserves. Right. So the sooner the better that these guys can sort of get what they deserve in terms of opportunity and get paid finally. Eckler finally did get the opportunities, finally got paid. Now he's looking like the true primary back in Washington. It's possible Brian Robinson's going to come back and not be the starter, right?
I think it's possible that Eckler, that touch threshold, could get high enough that instead of just what I like to call like a what the heck flex, like, well, you have to flex somebody, he's probably going to get you between 8 and 12 points. Maybe he'll score a touchdown. That he might get more to like 12 to 15 touches a game instead of 8 to 12 touches a game.
Yeah.
But
then Brian Robinson's kind of unusable at that point because we have a mobile quarterback.
Right. The question is,
it becomes a problem. Remember, the two back sort of fantasy relevant situations, almost always it's Jake Delhomme, Jared Goff.
Sure.
It's a mobile quarterback where they don't have to share red zone touchdowns. So, I think we're trending toward Brian Robinson being a very challenging start. I think that's a danger.
Washington, just the backfield in general. Also, Chris Rodriguez could complicate things too.
It's a problem.
He's not a bad. And the other thing is, Brian. I think that if we were talking about next year, like going into next year, Brian Robinson's back where he started the season in terms of the depth chart and the share of the backfield.
Yeah.
But because he's had 2 different injuries now this year, first it was a knee, now a hamstring. Also, this team, again, smart teams. Not every team is a smart team. This Washington team, big showdown with Philly this week, and you don't want to count your chickens before they hatch, but you should at least be thinking about January. You want Brian Robinson's hamstring to completely heal, and also you want to go lighter on him. So I think you're right that Eckler's trending up a little bit. And the thing that was most comforting was, remember, with Eckler, we always knew he had the goods, but they weren't giving him goal line carries. And they were giving him goal line carries, and he was doing a good job with them yesterday. So, and he could have had 3 touchdowns. McNichols vultured one.
McNichols, he's back.
He's back, I know. And you feel,
I love it. What a great story, this kid.
Well, yeah, because it means you believe
he's going to be
yourself.
30 years old with an NFL.
Right.
Who knew? Who thought?
It's going to be part of something really special. I think everybody that was on this Washington team this year is going to remember it, and they bonded, and there's a lot going on with that team behind the scenes. They're a family. So, yeah, McNichols had to believe in himself year after year when the NFL was like, you're not good enough. We don't want you. We don't need you. And he just kept saying, these stories are close to my heart because of James Harrison, right? Or we talk about the undrafted free agents for the Saints. Lance Moore is another good one. Where like multiple times the league says, no, you're not good enough. There's not a place for you here. And they say, you're wrong. And I'm going to show you. So good for McNichols.
Yeah, it's really great. It's really great. Look around the league. Do you see a particular handcuff running back where you're like, I know that guy's better than the incumbent?
Jaylen Warren.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
I'm sorry, you should, but no, that's
sorry.
cheating.
I didn't mean. I meant.
That's
I meant not that obvious. I meant slightly under the radar, maybe.
Right. I think some of the situations.
You got the right answer, and I didn't. It's not.
Well,
now my question sounds like it's dumb.
Well, no, I mean, some of the situations that maybe deserve a little more examination are like, Ray Davis, and I think James Cook has been fantastic, but I think Ray Davis has done enough that there's a case to be made for him having more like a split, like we're talking about what's going on in Washington. And I'm just looking down the teams and seeing if anything else jumps out at me when I think about the backup running backs. Well, sure would have been nice if Carson Steele hadn't fumbled, and maybe we could have seen what he did. I
think Carson Steele is one.
Yeah, I mean that's one.
Come on, man! Enough with the fumbles, like costing guys.
I know,
like going from a full-time role to 2 carries. Come on, man!
I know, and it doesn't seem like Andy Reid to be like that anyway. But they believe in everybody to the bitter end. I'll tell you one that might be under the radar that is actually actionable, and it has to do with a point you brought up earlier. And I'm not saying that when you compare these two running backs in a vacuum, that the backup is better, but I'm saying who might be worth more for fantasy football down the stretch, I think, is Gus Edwards. I think that because we just every time I bring this up, Matt, I want to say I want to be talking about J.K. Dobbins playing in his 80th consecutive game, like 5 years from now.
God. That's a good one though.
Yeah, I'm not saying Gus Edwards is better than J.K. Dobbins, but he looked fresh yesterday. He looked so much better than he did earlier in the year, and we know this team is going to feed the running game. So Edwards, maybe that's the not obvious answer that people can be thinking about. And another one I'm going to toss out there, and again, it's not better than, but just something to keep in mind. Marshawn Lloyd.
Oh, I forget it. You always forget about Marshawn Lloyd. God,
so we'll see if he gets activated. We'll see what happens with Josh Jacobs. We'll see.
Don't forget, dude. Hey, look at Tyrone Tracy. Look at a lot of these rookie running backs. We just haven't seen Marshawn Lloyd yet. Right? If deep league, stash this guy. Why not? Are you overweight on Jamar Chase this year, by the way?
I wish, but I felt it was a little ominous. I didn't know. Here's the problem. Other organizations, you could have said, well, they're going to do the right thing. They're going to just sign the player. Like, you knew that CeeDee Lamb was going to get signed, even though Jerry Jones isn't the best person to hold out as a rational actor. When it comes to that kind of stuff, he was going to get signed. And I thought, well, the Bengals just might botch this because they're the Bengals. So, no, I wasn't. But I do have him in the Apex League. So I'm happy to be part of that, league of a long time ago. Gosh, I don't know how long we've been doing that one. And I'd get my ass handed to me every year in that league. And I had the Burrow to Chase hookup in my lineup last week. And I'm actually at least going to make the playoffs. We'll see what happens.
I had Amon-Ra and Justin Jefferson ahead of him, but I wasn't drafting running backs in the first round. So I ended up being even weight on him for that reason. So I have some, and I'm happy about it. And you can't be mad at yourself for drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown or Justin Jefferson. That's just not, you're not, if anyone out there is feeling bad about that, please don't. I'm telling you right now, and I'm sure you'll back me up on this, right? Don't feel bad. It was great. It was a great process. And, you knew to draft one of those receivers in that spot, and you could have been the guy that drafted Breece Hall, and now you're really feeling the pain. So don't feel bad.
Right. No, agreed.
Yeah. What about Amari Cooper? Once he's finally activated, what do you expect?
I just think this offense by design, and they told us this, they always said, and they lit up. They were happy to be playing in this Joe Brady offense, but they all said everybody's going to eat. That's what they said. Everybody's going to eat. And I don't think Amari Cooper changes that. I don't think that he's a heavenly body with such a gravitational pull that now targets are getting pulled away from Khalil Shakir. Or, now Dawson Knox. We'll see about Dalton Kincaid. Or Curtis Samuel, who all of a sudden is getting targets, right?
He's back.
Or Mac Hollins, who can play.
Back.
I
just think there's so much room for him if he is getting separation, especially timing it right as Josh Allen's rolling out.
I mean, and you're right. That's the key. Well, look, that's the key. And you want to watch a few plays because I don't think Cooper's been fully integrated in the offense yet.
No.
So what was the key? When was the moment with DeAndre Hopkins in week 9, when you're like, oh, I way overthought this, for me at least? It was whenever, and they said that Mahomes told him, hey, if I extend the play, just keep running. And he did. And Mahomes threw him into triple coverage, basically. And Hopkins made the play. And it's the sign that like he can finish the sentence. Mahomes can start the sentence. He can finish the sentence. So if you see a play or two, because you know who was really good at this was Gabe Davis. If you see a play or two where Allen extends it and Cooper just understands this is the space he's going to throw it to. This is where he wants me to run right now. It's not something you can practice. It's not something you can anticipate. It's intuitive. If that's there, then you're right. Then that could be the tilter to make, if those 5 targets turn into 3 or 4 for over 100 and a touchdown every week. But Cooper has to show that he's able to do that.
Jaylen Waddle, what do we do? I
mean, you just got to play him.
Yes.
You just hope that Tyreek Hill has looked not great this year. Okay, with the exception of the revenge game to open the season.
It was weird that the guy that's a 30-year-old field stretcher, one of the best deep threats of all time, certainly not just a one-dimensional player. No one's saying that. But a speed-reliant receiver has his earliest ADP of his career in his age 30 season. Just that fundamental fact made it tough to push the button on him. And Jaylen Waddle's a phenomenal talent. I think he's like a smaller version, a little bit shorter version of Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin has had a very interesting year where the touchdowns are not lining up with the yards, but he's always giving you 18 fantasy points. One of these weeks, he's going to have a 40-point week.
Yep.
And he's going to win people millions of dollars in DFS. So that's coming. We all know that's coming. George Pickens also feels like that he's on the precipice of a big spike week. He just can't quite get the target share. Right? But I am impressed with Russell Wilson, unfairly maligned by all sports analysts, including fantasy sports analysts. He was an MVP quarterback. He's not in his 40s, is he? Right? Last week, everyone was playing Aaron Rodgers just fine. Forgot that he was 40 years old. And you never know with these guys. That's the Ben Roethlisberger corollary for me. Never knew what Ben Roethlisberger was going to give you when he was 40 years old. He could give you 30 points. He could give you 3. And that's just how the human body is at age 40. Wilson, I think, I didn't realize this. I was locking in Justin Fields as the starting quarterback after those first few weeks, and I feel super gullible that I let that confirmation bias, because I like him, I let that get me. I should have been way more skeptical about Justin Fields, and now that I'm seeing what this offense is with Russell Wilson, I'm like, yeah, man, whoops.
Yeah. Oh, I said this week after the game, because remember, I'm also Steelers.
Well, that's the thing. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this with Russell Wilson because of the Steelers connection.
I said I take back everything mean that I ever thought or said about Russell Wilson, and some of it is stuff where it's kind of who's from your tribe or something. I mean, Russell Wilson is just, for lack of a better way to put it, he's corny. He's just kind of corny.
Oh, he's the corniest player in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the corniest people on the planet.
Thank you. I just please take this to one step further. Thank you.
I mean, that's not even a competition, right?
Yeah. Fake push-ups on the plane. Come on, dude.
I mean, it's but so that colored my thoughts on him. Also, you saw the Seattle offense was better after he left, and the talk was, well, he can't run an offense. Like, you can't get him to run an offense. Like, he's just going to do Russell Wilson ball. And then he goes and he's got Nathaniel Hackett. Okay, so now you got the stink of it. Okay, well, is it him or is it Nathaniel Hackett? Is it both? It was a failure. Whatever. He was associated with failure. And then last year, Sean Payton, well, it's clear Sean Payton never wanted him. Oh, Sean Payton's going to fix Russell Wilson. He took this job. No, Sean Payton never wanted Russell Wilson. And he never.
Well, that's a clash of egos right there.
Well, he never even installed a full offense. I think that, and this is stuff that I'm privy to just because Cecil's covering the team. And there's a lot of things if you cover a team that you can never say because you're never going to get access if you actually say what's going on. Cecil slips that stuff in. He calls it Lassie Barks on our show every now and then. But Sean Payton never really even installed his offense. He never thought Russell Wilson was going to be able to run it and never did it. So now, is that a Payton failure? Is that a Wilson failure? And you just start to connect the dots. And then, I think he probably took the Pittsburgh job because it was one of the only places. Well, I mean, who wouldn't want to play for Mike Tomlin? But also, really, like you're going to.
I want to play for Mike Tomlin so bad.
Yeah, I want to play.
I just want to get out of the stadium alive.
Yeah,
that's all I want to do. I just want to get out of a stadium alive with Mike Tomlin.
Oh yeah, he's that cool. He is that guy. He's exactly what he appears to be. But I thought, well, okay, Russell Wilson, and then Russell Wilson, the Steelers' new strength coach probably messed up when you're like, everybody hit the sleds. Not everybody needs to hit the sleds, okay? It's first day of camp, it's conditioning test, whatever. Hit the sleds early, or Russell Wilson hits the sleds, hurts his calf. Now, is that some sort of sign, right? That opens the door for Justin Fields, et cetera, et cetera. Because I'm with you, I would
Fields. Strain my calf if I did the sleds.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, this is something, we could do a whole series of shows on like things that all of us.
I had a terrible night's sleep last night. Because I took my first yoga class in 9 months.
Oh my gosh!
On Sunday. And
I
couldn't get comfortable. Every, all these flexors and subluxors.
Yeah.
And all these things were all stretched and sore, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't find a way to sleep. I had this like. I don't know, this crazy shape that I had to contort my body in just to try to not feel like a shooting pain in my hip.
Yeah. They say use it or lose it, and it's right, actually.
I got to use it. I got to go back. So basically, instead of saying, no, I'm not going to do yoga anymore, it's too painful, I got to do it more because I don't want to, that's the only answer is to just keep going with it. If you're going to take the pain, it's not going to be any worse than this. Next time, it's going to be better. It's going to be easier.
Exactly. That's it.
But last night, rough.
Pain. I think it was Jillian Michaels said, "Pain is fear leaving the body."
Ooh, I like that. Hey, what about Travis Kelce? Because I've maintained it's got to be George Kittle. No Ayuk. It's got to be Kittle, tight end 1. Got to be Kittle, tight end 1. Now we've got the Xavier Worthy injury. Not that really matters. And he's just worked his way back into shape. He had the total dad bod going on to start the season, and I think he's making me and anyone that referred to him as dust look really dumb.
Yeah, him and Mark Andrews are going to really haunt us, and it's good. And this
Andrews we saw coming though. It was a tightrope procedure. We knew that it would take a half a season for him and Tank Dell to come back online. But I was totally. He was confirming all of my suspicions early in the year. Yeah. I was like, "Oh, this is a problem." But
right.
As soon as Rashee Rice went down, if I could go back in time, I would love to be all in on Kelce.
Right. And it can be something unforeseen like that. I mean, in the multiverse, like if Rashee Rice stays healthy, are we even talking about Kelce? Are you saying, is it time to finally give up on him because of how the first 3 weeks went? But I do want to give a shout out to Adam Harstad, who's like intimidatingly intelligent, and he runs the numbers that say for the first 4 weeks of the season, ADP is still more predictive than what a player has done on average. Granted, but it's just something you need to be open to because I think in terms of Kelce and Andrews, if you had just gotten in at that point 3 weeks in when everyone's like, I don't even know if I want to start him. I might drop him just out of spite because I'm tired of him losing the week for me. And no, it ends up we were right to draft them early. They're fine.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had a little bit of an argument with our head of analytics, Evan Ringler, the great Evan Ringler. He moved Kelce ahead of Bowers in the season ranks. And I was like, dude, what are you doing, man? And I even pointed to like fantasy points per game, like a total fish. And he's like, bro, you need to let go of your Kelce hate. And he set me straight, man. And I was like, all right, cool. But I was like, as long as we have Kittle at tight end 1, I'm okay. But at this point, it's a coin flip. I'm still Kittle. Or are you leaning Kittle or Kelsey?
I'm probably going to take Kelsey just because Kansas City is.
That.
They're boring. Kansas City's a boring offense.
Sometimes I ask a question I don't want to hear the answer to just because I know it's good for me to hear.
Yeah, and the other thing with Kittle, and I love George Kittle. I just did something yesterday where I said, hey, we need to recognize him as one of the best players in the game, period.
He's so good.
I compared him to like the 5-tool baseball player. He's so rare. It's so rare that there's a player that has so many jobs and is one of the best at every single one of them, whatever you ask him to do. But I also know, and one of the reasons I love him, I mentioned Heinz Ward already, like the joyful warriors. All my favorite players are the joyful warriors. But that attitude also means he doesn't take care of his own, like he doesn't practice self-preservation, you know? So Kelsey does. you know what I mean?
He is that might be the tiebreaker. He is a bigger injury risk for sure. The injury history is there. And then the injury history is there for tight ends. I think we got lulled into a false sense of security with all these tight ends not getting hurt as much, and then all of a sudden, bang, 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 Goddard goes down, Kincaid goes down. So we had a big wipeout of tight end injuries last week, and we've also enjoyed the great RB resilience year, where if you did 0 RB this year, you had to really thread the needle. I mean, if you didn't get exactly like Aaron Jones. Right, if you weren't taking the exact right guys in the exact right rounds, then you're really underwater. It's just, I mean, if basically Aaron Jones, Chase Brown was the only way to go.
James Conner, David Montgomery,
and James Conner, and David Montgomery. Yeah, they were okay. That was like
they're all 7th round picks.
That was like a round earlier, right? They were around earlier for sure. That was a way to go.
And Mixon 5th, Kamara 5th.
Mixon in the 5th round? You saw Mixon in the 5th round?
Early on. Maybe he got to the 4th.
Early. Yeah, maybe.
But I mean, I'm just saying, like, you could. And the thing was,
now
it was so
Pollard's got Spears, and now they're sharing touches, and so you can't.
Right.
Pollard's almost unusable at this point now.
I mean, every running back strategy worked this year because of how they've held value. So many players.
That's true. Yeah, because in a most common 0 running back build, very easily you could have had David Montgomery and Aaron Jones, and that's also just what us, old veterans, grizzly old veterans. Those are the guys we were drafting anyway.
Right. Or you also could have just drafted Jordan Mason and Chuba Hubbard late. You could. I mean, there's so many different ways. There's so many different right answers so far. That's the part that I think is so strange or remarkable, is that rarely do we see so many running backs in like their top 10 or 20% of outcomes, because it's just such a brutal position. But that's what we're seeing this year.
That was my guy. I mean, Chuba was my guy. That was the one sort of take that I had early on that I felt most strongly about, which was that the way you're gonna get Jonathan Brooks to pay off for so many reasons, just a myriad of reasons, that he's on the Panthers and there's all these problems with Jonathan Brooks, in addition to like the probability that he has a setback, without even talking, just assuming he has a setback-free rehabilitation, and assuming that Chuba Hubbard is thoroughly mediocre. All these things have to line up for what the ADP assumes to be the reality to even come true. And then even if it does come true, even if all these assumptions do line up, then what are you really getting, right? From a rookie player dropped into a hellscape of a situation. What are we doing? So what ended up happening, Sig, was that I had a moment of clarity where I was like, if I'm going to be this bearish on Jonathan Brooks, then guess what? You better back the truck up to Chuba Hubbard, right? If you're going to, on the one hand, feel this passionate about 0 Jonathan Brooks, then you need to take your own advice and take it to this natural conclusion, which is you better just have Chuba Hubbard penciled in as the 3rd running back off the board for your team every single time.
Yeah, and I know it's draft prep season, and I'm going to have to go into the sunset on this take, but I think you brought up something really important. The idea I always had, but I never follow through on any of my ideas, was like a fantasy football personality test where, like, in July, you just ask a bunch of questions, and then you spit out, like, these are the players you should target. Like, just tell me what your beliefs are. We're not talking about fantasy football. Just tell me what your beliefs are, and then I'll tell you who you should target. And there's also a lot of situations in fantasy football that are in draft prep, and really during the season too. They're exactly what you're defining. Like, if you have a strong negative feeling, there is probably a corresponding strong positive feeling that you're not exploring, or otherwise this is why it's good to do projections. If you ever do season-long projections, right, or even weekly projections, because it forces you to be honest. Because if you think a team's going to throw for 250 yards, but you think this guy's dog shit and this guy's dog shit, well, who does that leave? And that's how you end up. Oh yeah, Quentin Johnston is actually, if Palmer is hurt and we think Herbert's going to be effective or whatever. The point is, your beliefs can lead you right up to the precipice, and you just need to look up, and there it is.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to PlayerProfiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, Data Analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.